I never forget, we were in the locker room waiting for basketball practice to start, and he's reading this book. He said there was a line in the book that says, half the men in the world masturbate and the other half lie about it.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Manhood. I'm Jalen Barnes and this is my dad, Joenathan Barnes, Jr. I almost said my wife because I'm used to having Cacie next to me all the time. As you know, I've done a few episodes of Manhood already. It's my new series centered around men, and it is evolving and it is changing. I'm going to have guests a lot more frequently, and I'm proud to have, as my first guest, the best man I know, my father, the man who raised me, Joenathan Barnes. So we are going to continue a discussion that I started solo on the channel. I did a few videos on it, and it was very popular, and it was talking about pornography.
Yes.
I did 2 or 3 videos on that. Yeah. And that was never intended to be the last time I talked about it. That was just an introductory, like a shot over the bow, like, okay, let's get this thing started. And it got good response, and we've got comments and questions, things like that. We're going to answer a question today. And, you know, you reached out to me actually and said that when you saw my video, I think you saw one of the clips on Instagram, and you told me that you were willing to come on and talk about your personal experiences.
Yes, because so many times people get caught up in things. And there's some people that choose to do it because they want to do it. But you have people that get caught up in things, whether they were influenced by others, that don't want to have to deal with it. And when I saw what you did, I said, wait a minute. You know, I had experiences with that. I want to support my son and also show people how this is a lineage thing. You know, it's not just something that you just one day wake up and want to do. Just like any other iniquity or just like any other sin, it passes down through the lineage. So I thought it'd be important that people see the background from a perspective of how what I experienced flowed down without me even recognizing it, to cause you to experience some things and to help people just get free of it.
I mean, this is very important to me, and when again, the series is called Manhood, so we're going to be talking specifically to men. Me and Cacie will actually follow this up with a series on Jalen and Cacie stories targeted towards married couples and women too, because it's not just a man thing, it's a woman thing. But if you're a woman and you're watching this, I'm sure you can get something out of this, but we are going to be targeting men. But being a father now, my son, as of the recording of this, my son, Jalen Jr., was just born a little over 2 weeks ago. And so even before he was born, this was something that was on my mind. And as I was struggling with pornography, even as a married man, it was something that I was like, I need to figure this out. I mean, I know that Jesus is bigger than this. I know he has conquered this, and that because I'm in him, I can conquer this. I just don't know how. But I got to figure this out because I need to have an answer for my son when he enters into the world, in a world that is so inundated with pornography. And I want to talk about how things have changed, because the way you access it was different from the way I was able to access it. And in my previous series, I went back to the history of pornography, going back to harems, talking about King Solomon and the woman they had in his harem, and how that was the same general concept, the concept of a man feeling like a king and having access to any number of women who can't say no to him, and at the click of a button. And that's what pornography is today. And it's evolved over the years, and that was very strategic. And it makes, you mentioned before we started recording, how much money the pornography industry makes. And
it's just,
in a future video, I'm going to go into some of those stats, but it makes a lot of money, and there's a lot of illegal money in that too when you get into human trafficking. So there's some aspects of that I want to talk about, but for now, we're just going to talk about how it affects you and how you can be free. So just stay tuned. I don't know how many videos it's going to take, but we're going to keep releasing them, and just stick with it and share with everybody that you know. Go ahead, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and make sure you hit the notification bell. Get all notifications, because you're going to want to know every time one of these comes out, so that you can watch it, you can share it with somebody you know. If you're a woman watching this, share it with the men in your life. And you wonder, is it applicable to them? It's applicable to every man. I'm not saying that every man watches pornography, but every man has seen pornography. And whatever their status is with it right now, this is something that they need to hear, because it's going to save a lot of people and a lot of families. But I want to get started with going into your history with this, with pornography, and what it was like back then, what your exposure to it was, how it was introduced into your life, what was the culture around it with friends, family members. Just take it away. What was your introduction to that world?
Well, I grew up in the 70s, basically. You know, I was born in '65, and as the '70s came through, there were so many different things going on.
Yeah.
But the first introduction I had to pornography was, and at this time, this was the like main way, was magazines.
Yeah.
You had a magazine called Playboy. You had a magazine called Hustler. And there were some others out there. And I had a family member. I want to be careful not to use names and things like that. But I had a family member who kind of collected these like they collected comic books.
Wow.
And I think I stumbled on one day. And I just started looking through it. The interesting thing is, I don't know that there were ever any words between me and that family member.
Yeah.
And I don't recall ever even having a discussion about this in my family at all with anyone. Not even a discussion on sexual relationships with the opposite sexes.
Yeah.
So it was just like, oh, what's this? I'm flipping through the magazine. Oh, okay. And it was there, like the comic books were there. So what I didn't realize is, in my mind, the rationale was, oh, this is something that's supposed to be around because comic books were around. You know, people collected those things. But this family member collected these magazines.
Did you have any indication that it was morally wrong in any way?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't. And I think because, now, had the discussion come up about it, I will say this. My grandmother, for what she knew as a Christian, she was hardcore.
Yeah.
And had she known, she would have addressed it.
Yeah. Then that's another good question because we're going to compare and contrast our histories. Was your household, was it a Christian household? Was it you just had a Christian grandmother? Like what was the church in your life as growing up?
We had a religious household. Grandma was very committed. You know, I mean, there was not a time where you wouldn't know that she's praying or that she was reading her Bible or something like that. I think otherwise, pretty much in the house, we played church. Never, I don't think outside of grandma there was anybody that was really, really serious about church. So she was it, basically. Now, we went to church, we participated, we had to go, no matter what. Even as we grew up and got older, if we were around that house, it was understood. Grandma only had to say it once. You know, you knew you were going to church.
But were you saved? Were you born again? Were you ever
I thought I
introduced to
was,
Jesus?
but no.
Okay.
Not according to the word standard.
Yeah.
You know, not according to the word standard. No, I wasn't. No.
So, you had the introduction. Do you know around what age you might have been?
Gosh. I'm going to say maybe 8, 9 years old. Maybe a little after that. No, it could have been around that time. Yeah, it could have been. Because, see, we had an interesting family dynamic. My mom had a home, and it was me and my 2 young, well, not at that time. Initially, it was just me. But we all seemed to gather at my grandmother's house. It was just the place where everybody was. Grandma's house was, I guess, more structured than anybody else's. I mean, her and one of her daughters, my aunt, owned a beauty salon. And that's how they made their living.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, every day when we got home from school, dinner was ready.
Yeah.
The beauty salon was only a block away from the house, so grandma would come home, cook dinner, and so we had that kind of structure.
You had a real good family support system as far as family that was close, that was there for you, things like that.
Yeah, we did. The interesting thing was, though, it was predominantly women.
Yeah.
The males were, especially immediately. Now, my grandmother's son, my uncle, was around.
Yeah.
And he did what he could. But having a father or someone there, just that wasn't there. Now, my grandfather died when I was young.
Yeah.
Had he lived, I think a lot of our family dynamic would have been different. Because I think everybody dealt with his death in a different way.
Yeah.
But pretty much that's what it was. We were all raised by the women, and my uncle did his part the best he could.
I kind of want to build a picture here because everybody's story is different.
Yeah.
And our stories are vastly different.
Yeah.
But so you've got not a whole lot of male leadership. You had a sort of accidental exposure to it. No one protected you from it. It was there. You got a hold of it. You were a very young age,
Yeah.
less than even a teenager when you got exposed to it. And so you had a loving family, but no one was talking about this.
Right.
So how do you think your exposure to pornography did it? Everybody's different. Not everybody who views pornography becomes addicted to it. Sometimes, you talk about like gateway drugs. Sometimes it's just a means to an end for sexual satisfaction, but then you move on to quote unquote bigger and better things. So how did it inform the way you handled women, the way you handled sex as you grew up in life? Was it always there, a part of what you used, or did you kind of put it away from you as you went on, or was it just kind of how did it inform your life?
Because I was so young and there wasn't really too much involvement with girls and things like that, I don't know that it really played a role, but I think it was the foundation for what would happen later. Because as I went through school and all of that, the guys, we never really talked about that stuff, but you knew that there were things out there once in a while. I'll never forget, I was in high school, and one of the guys, and I went to a very small private school, and one of the guys was reading a book, and I believe it was the book, Monty Python book or whatever, and I never forget, we were in the locker room waiting for basketball practice to start, and he's reading this book, and he lets out this huge laugh, and everybody's like, what are you laughing at? And he said, this is the one thing in the book to that point that stood out to him. He said there was a line in the book that says, half the men in the world masturbate and the other half lie about it. And at that time, we were laughing about, but as we were preparing for this and as we talked about it, I thought about that. Yeah. How it's probably true. Yeah. It's probably true. Yeah. And this was back in the 80s, okay, early to mid 80s. I graduated from high school in 83. So this was around that time. But what I found is later on, and I can't tell you what event did it, but I found myself looking at pornography on the internet. Because and now, gosh, I mean, I thank God I'm delivered now, but I can't imagine what it must be like now, because you're so inundated, and what people are going through. And then all of the areas that it reaches into with the, the human trafficking and those kind of things. But, I just think it was something that was just back there, and it was something, like I said, that had laid a foundation or was just there so that if I saw an image or something, it would be able to react, that I would know that that's what that was. Yeah. And it was like almost like picking up where you left off, which was really weird. But
do you believe that being exposed to pornography and possibly even being exposed to sex at a young age informed the way you saw, looked at women, handled women, expectations you have, things like that? Do you think it had any impact on any relationships you had going forward?
Not necessarily, only because, like I said, we were pretty much raised by women. So, but the women that raised us were very strong. Yeah. Very, they could be independent with no problem. In fact, my aunt was, she had no kids of her own, but we were like her kids.
That's pretty interesting, then. So you had a real life example of who women are, who women were, very strong women. So even if you had, because porn is fake, it's fantasy and it presents things. So even though porn will present this idea of women that's unrealistic, you already had a real image of what women were, so you could probably dissect and divide the fake from the real. Yeah.
And it's interesting though, because you asked, like your first encounter with sexual things like that. We had a neighbor a few houses down, and she had a daughter, and we were all like friends, But I will say, when we were young, now that I think back, there were situations where we would be pretending to have sex or things like that. We had a game we called Catch a Girl, Kiss a Girl. And I can remember there were little places that we would go and hide and play grinding games. So there was no actual intercourse, but there might as well have been.
Yeah. So no real boundaries in place to keep you from making the wrong decisions. It was just...
No, man. And son, I'm telling you, the memories and pictures that are coming to mind right now. For it not to be that prevalent, the things that we were into and some of the things that we did, now that I look back on it, it's like, wow. It just has to be a tribute to the sin nature, man, and that door opening. But again, to bring it full circle, my introduction to pornography was magazines, because that was the prevalent way at the time for it to happen. And I didn't have to go searching for them; they were there. Yeah. Whether they were hidden under the bed, in between the mattresses, or hidden in the closet, or under the box, in the box, with all the comic books underneath them, or whatever. I could find them, no matter where they were hidden. I could find them. And I can't really say how much I looked at them. I just knew that they were there. Yeah. And that's where I had my introduction to pornography. Yeah.
Well, that's your background, your story, your introduction is going to sound different from mine. And so in the next video, we're going to go in and talk about that. And then we'll come together and look at answering the question that we got from one of the viewers and get into that. But I just kind of want to compare and contrast because it gets very interesting. And I believe that because of the way that I was raised differently, being raised well, when I interacted with it, the response that I had to it was different and maybe even a little more extreme, strangely enough. And we're going to talk about that. But thank you for everyone who's watching thus far. Tune in for the next video. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell so that you know when we release the next video in this manhood series. And we're going to talk about this later. The description, and there's a link in the description of the video to Ever Accountable. It is an application that I use. We're going to talk about it later on. That monitors what's going on your devices, whether that's a computer, whether that's a cell phone, whether that's a tablet. And you pay a subscription fee to it, and it allows you to have an accountability partner, someone that you trust, who will get reports on a regular basis of what you're looking at on your phone. There's other features as well as the ability to take screenshots of what you're looking at, and you can kind of customize it. But it can put a barrier in place to keep you safe so that while you're using your phone, while you're on the computer, there's someone who you can be accountable to that can stop having a conversation with you if you're getting a little too close to the edge or even go over the edge when it comes to pornography and inappropriate things online. So if you click that link in the description of this video, that's an affiliate link of ours. We do receive a commission if you purchase it based off of that link. But it is something we'll talk about in future videos that is very useful to you if you're on this journey. But come back for the next video. We're very excited. I'm Joenathan Barnes. Thank you for watching this episode of Manhood.